Dear all, welcome to the playlist of Sensors and Transducer. In this session, I'll be discussing the measurement of non-electrical quantities by using various transducers. First, let us understand how to measure pressure. Since pressure is a non-electrical quantity, what are the different tools or what are the different transducers which will help us to measure pressure? So before moving on to the pressure measurement, first let's get to understand what do you mean by pressure. So moving on to the definition of pressure, you can able to study what is a pressure. So pressure is nothing but the force per unit area. So P is equal to F by A. This is a general equation for pressure. And the pressure exerted by a gases or vapors, liquids, especially fluids we can say. The SI unit of pressure are as follows. You can call it as Newton per meter square or you can call Pascal. And also one more supplementary unit is available. Usually we express the pressure in terms of bar. 1 bar is equal to how many Newton per meter square? 1 bar is nothing but 10 to the power 5 Newton per meter square. Or else you can call it as 1 bar is equivalent to 100 kilopascal. Let us define what is a Pascal. A Pascal can be defined as force of 1 Newton applied over a surface area of 1 meter square. So that is the meaning of Pascal. You can study the definition. So this is the basics of the pressure. Okay. Hope you have understood what is a pressure. Moving on to the further discussion. There are different type of pressures available. Let's just understand what are the different type of pressure. So first is the foremost absolute pressure, then differential pressure, atmospheric pressure, gauge pressure, and two more terminologies also remaining, that is static and dynamic pressure, that I will let you know afterwards. So first let's understand what do you mean by absolute pressure. So before explaining that, I will show you a particular diagram so that you will understand it carefully. You can understand it very easily. So you can able to see a pressure of the system. So consider the line. So you can see the particular different type of pressure in the particular diagram. See, this is a pressure of a system. This is actually the vacuum. Medium will be vacuum. So you can able to measure the absolute pressure in this manner. This is your absolute pressure. And the absolute pressure comprises of two segments, the sum of atmospheric pressure and the gauge pressure. See, the absolute pressure can be written as the sum of atmospheric pressure. This is your atmospheric pressure and this will be the gauge pressure. Okay, pressure gauges you can able to measure by using different gauges, instruments. Sum of gauge pressure and atmospheric pressure is known as absolute pressure. From that you can easily compute the vacuum pressure. So what is vacuum pressure? So vacuum pressure you can able to calculate the difference between atmospheric pressure and the absolute pressure. Okay. So here also the relation is given. See, atmospheric pressure is already given from the absolute zero to this particular point. This is your atmospheric pressure, and the gauge pressure is given in this area. So if you know these parameters, definitely you can able to calculate the vacuum pressure. Vacuum pressure must be the difference between the atmospheric pressure, which is shown here, and the gauge pressure. So from the diagram itself it is merely visible. Now let us understand the definition. Now I will be taking you the definition. Okay, please move on to the definition. What is absolute pressure? The pressure which is related to the reference pressure is known as absolute pressure. See, look at this, absolute pressure. It's a reference pressure. Pressure measured above the absolute zero. Where is absolute zero? Can you able to point out absolute zero? Yes, it is very easy to point out the absolute zero. So in the bottom side you can able to see this is your absolute zero. See, you can see the absolute zero. See, this is your absolute zero. Pressure which can be measured above the absolute zero, that is known as absolute pressure. Okay. Now let's understand what is a differential pressure. The difference between two pressure is known as differential pressure. For example, we are having the two pressure like P2, and if you calculate the difference between P2 and P1, then I will be getting the differential pressure delta P. So difference in two pressure, that is called delta P. Hope it is clear. Now let's get to understand atmospheric pressure. The pressures related to atmosphere that surrounds the earth is atmospheric pressure. The pressure is the atmospheric pressure is 100% the weather dependent. Where is atmospheric pressure? I think you can have an observation. See, so atmospheric pressure you can able to calculate. How to calculate atmospheric pressure? The difference between absolute pressure, okay, the difference between the absolute pressure minus gauge pressure. Okay, here you can see the atmospheric pressure. It is a weather dependent, and if you calculate the difference between absolute pressure and gauge pressure, I am able to get the atmospheric pressure. I think it is clear. Now let's understand about gauge pressure. It is a difference between absolute pressure and atmospheric pressure. Gauge pressure is the difference between absolute pressure and atmospheric pressure. If you look at the diagram, if you study the diagram, then the concept will be very much easy. Pressure measured with the help of pressure measuring instruments, where atmospheric pressure is taken as reference. While measuring the gauge pressure, do remember that atmospheric pressure will be considered as a reference. This one will be considered as a reference. Okay, so you have to calculate the difference between the absolute pressure and the atmospheric pressure. Then definitely you will be getting gauge pressure. Calculate the difference. Okay, and this diagram also will be helpful for you. See, so absolute pressure, it is given here, absolute pressure. Then absolute pressure is segmented into the gauge pressure and atmospheric pressure. Again, you can able to calculate the vacuum pressure. If you want to calculate the vacuum pressure, what you do? Then you can calculate the difference between atmospheric pressure and the gauge pressure. Then definitely you will be getting the vacuum pressure. And if you want to calculate the atmospheric pressure, take the sum of vacuum pressure and absolute pressure. So please to remember these two diagrams, then the concept will be very much easy. So it will be helpful for any type of competitive examination, and it's one of the major confusing area. So definitely you can rectify those confusion. Okay, so we studied what is absolute pressure, then differential pressure, atmospheric pressure, gauge pressure, etc. Now let's get understand what is a static and a dynamic pressure. So static pressure, as the name suggests, it's a fixed one actually. Consider a fixed segment. The pressure applied on the fixed segment, especially in the air. The pressure applied by the air to the walls perpendicular to the airstream. It corresponds to the sum of all the pressure drops of the duct system and components. That is called a static pressure. Or if you want, you can remodify the definition in this manner. The force per unit area acting on the walls by the fluid at rest is known as static pressure. Remember the word rest. What is rest? It's a static condition. Force per unit area acting on the walls by the fluid at rest is known as static pressure. So what is dynamic pressure? Dynamic, it's a kinetic energy of the air that passes through the fan. It is applied to the walls that obstruct the airstream. The dynamic pressure is directly dependent on the air speed or air velocity. Look at this. Dynamic pressure can be calculated by the formula V square by 2g, where g is the acceleration due to gravity and v is the air stream flow or air speed. We can call it as velocity as well in terms of meter per second square. This is a difference between static and what I can say dynamic pressure. Okay, and you can use the static and dynamic pressure by using one equation. Okay, that means you must have studied about the Bernoulli's theorem in your PU classes or 12th standard. Here you can use the formula. So there is a fluid which is passing over a particular duct, as it is shown in the diagram. So it can be segmented into the static pressure plus the dynamic pressure plus the hydrostatic pressure. This much of amount that will be constant for every moving fluid. Okay, so this is actually regarding the static and the dynamic pressure. So there are different methods of measuring pressure. Coming to our topics, so we have to study the different method of measuring the pressure. Like low pressure, you can able to use the manometers and the low pressure gauge. Where medium and high pressure, you can use the Burden tube, diaphragm tube, bellow pressure gauge, electrical resistance pressure gauge, and low and ultra high vacuum pressure can be measured by using ionization gauge and McLeod, etc. For varying pressure can be measured by using the engine indicators. So these are the different methods of pressure. Here you can able to see how the pressure can be measured. Different ranges of pressure and the quantity which is shown over here. So it is very clear how to measure the pressure. The remaining portion will be continued in the next session. Thank you for watching this video.